Hello, Lauren Passarelli here. Wanted to talk to you about my 15th album, Big Blue Machine. I've been recording and mixing that. I'm all finished. And even right now as we speak, Platnumbaby is mastering these mixes. He reached out to me a few months ago wanting to work together. And we started talking about all this gear and the setup and what was happening. And most importantly, what was I doing with this big mixer? How much of it was really connected to here? And, you know, when things build up and come into being part of your setup over a long period of time, it's time to start rethinking how things are hooked up. So, as I had mentioned maybe in a couple of other videos, a lot of the outboard gear was being used as I/O plugins in Logic. And it's really cool that a lot of pieces of gear these days are starting to have the Ethernet cable where you can actually see it as a plug-in and remember its settings. But Platinum was suggesting that I use more of the analog features on the board, which I really got a kick out of. So I do have a bit of a two-setup situation. I can record and mix and do everything in Logic on one side of my studio, and then I can also just record and mix on the other side without looking at a computer screen. And what I found super exciting was being able to set up and do a bunch of different things in the box and then walk away from the box and actually be in front of the console, standing or sitting, whatever felt comfortable at the time. And it was reminding me of those old days working on the ADAT tapes with my 4 ADAT machines and my big Studio Master console where there wasn't a computer. It was reminding me of how it felt to mix music by just listening. And I was really loving that. And I was also loving the fact that when there was something very important that I had to do, like balancing out all the background vocals or making various submixes, I could do all of that in Logic. I could have all kinds of automation and various things happening. And if I want to bring it back, like I did on 2 faders, just bring back a bunch of stereo effects so that all the effects were in one place. You know, between the track stacks and what kinds of instruments and or voices you can combine to parse out to various channels, you have so many crazy options. So, you know, one of my first videos was, how are you doing it? I don't know how I want to work. Well, after I mixed 12 songs, I figured out how I wanted to work. And it's not a set and definite thing because it can change all the time. I'll give you an example. One of the things I thought I was going to do was have a template in Logic where everything was always going to parse out the same way. Bass was always going to come out on a specific channel. Drums were always going to be spread out on a certain channel. But it really depends on how many tracks I have and what I want to have extra control over, right? If I'm doing most of the bulk of corrective EQing in the box, I can do little sweetening things on the mixer. And sometimes I want the whole drum set out on individual tracks, and sometimes I just want a stereo pair of the drums because maybe there's more vocals in the next arrangement that needs care and more fun playing with on the mixer. Sometimes it's a slew of guitars, you know, so it changes. And I have a template and I have things routed, but sometimes I change my mind. And Platinum also gave me the great idea of printing stems. And the stems don't happen on the mixer going out various buses because I was using the 8 buses for some parallel effects. I'm returning 32 channels because I have 2 Apollo X16s. I can go 16 channels in and out now without any kind of delay and problems with converters. And each of those are going right to the stereo mix. If I start trying to parse those out individually, I only have 16 buses. It's a 16 in and out board. Of course, you could do 48 upon mixdown, but not that I could print separate 32 or different combinations of tracks. If I start assigning those tracks, I'm limited as to what I can do on the top faders and what I can do on the bottom faders. So I figured just solo and or mute what I don't want going through the mixer and printing them back into Logic. So I have just drums as a stereo pair for printing stems. I have just vocals, just effects, just instruments. And then I love that plug-in True Iron. So I have a lot of, well, pretty much a little bit of every instrument going to True Iron. Sometimes another version of True Iron on another submix going to just the vocals, but sometimes all of it going together. And then I printed even the results of True Iron as a stem. So if I need to change some subtle things, I have stems I can play with. All my gear was going to 6 different 1/4-inch patch bass. It would really be good to update the patch bass to something more reliable, and taking up less space. But, you know, by the time you're done with all the cabling and new gear and stuff, you don't want to mess with it again. I spent months rewiring, and occasionally some of the gear that was working just fine in the patch bay just didn't want to work. It just wasn't going to give me sound, or the signals weren't loud enough to detect that the piece of gear was working. So I was amazed to see so much gear at Platinum's studio in his videos, and he had so few patch bays. He had a lot of chains. So this gear, if you put in the side chain or if you put in an insert on his gear, piece of gear was going to a piece of gear was going into another piece of gear. So when some of mine stopped working in the patch bay, I did exactly that. Like my Neve MBP, the Portigo 2 MBP, used to work in my patch bays just fine. Decided it didn't want to be part of the patch bay system. So now I have it as the in and out of my submix, for the console. It's actually the mix, send and receive. But I also have it going to the Moog Night Pro. I have a 2-channel Moog EQ. Now, fortunately, the Moog is still working very nicely in the patch bay. So since the MBP is going to the Moog now, and the Moog is going to the patch bay, I can plug, if I wanted to insert the Moog outs to go someplace else, before it goes back to the board, if I want to insert something else there. So I not only got control back, but then I got like a nice little chain of events. Another thing that was happening was on my Fusion, I have the SSL Fusion, there's an insert button on that. So I have that going to the Warm Audio bus comp, and then I have the send and receive of the bus comp going to the Tegler Magnetmus. And that's like a little tape saturation. So sometimes I have the Fusion just coming up on 2 of the stereo sub-buses here on the mixer, just to add a little parallel processing either to voices or guitars or any other things I want to assign to it via the mixer. I can send it to the SSL, I can give it some drive and density, I can change the stereo image, I can add some light EQ, and I can also give it some of the bus comp and the Magnetmus if I want to have some extra little detail on the harmonic frequencies that make things sound exciting and sound like tape. Another chain I decided to do was my wah 273 EQ. For some reason, the 76 wah, the Warm Audio 1776, the Warm Audio 1176, wasn't working in the patch bay. The LA2A version of the Warm Audio wasn't working in the patch bay when it used to. So I have that being in the send receives of the wah 273 EQ. So again, I could plug a mic right into there or an instrument, or I can send a line signal there. And then if I want to, I can use the 1176 or the LA2A right with those send receive buttons and still have access to more buttons and knobs and switches to play with, which is what I enjoy doing. Another chain I did was the Wah Audio 2BQ. For some reason that wasn't working in my patch bay now. And so I put that in the Warm Audio 273. I put the EQP on one insert, and I also have a Rain PE17 parametric EQ I can put on the insert of channel 2. So yeah, that's fun. It's nice to know that everybody's connected and everybody's working again. Using more of the effect sends and receives and returns on the audience, I have the first send going to my Tegler Roomsit reverb. I have the second stereo sends going to the Auto BAM reverb. And then the third set are going to the Lexicon MPX1. I use that on a lot of songs on previous albums, especially on background vocals. And it's almost like a secret sauce. I just love that preset 23 on the MPX1. So it's nice to have that on this board, you know, you just kind of turn it up and there it is. And then I also have the Effects Network, and I have a Lexicon 91, PCM 91, that is connected to a bunch of things. And it's just nice to have in-the-box reverbs and real reverbs. And there's definitely different sounds, you know. In the beginning when you're recording, it's so nice to keep things simple, and it's so nice to just get better at the basics, right? But after a while, anybody who's telling you that analog gear doesn't really make that much difference, I think is just either trying to save you money or trying to keep their life simpler so they can stay in the box. Most of the albums that we love that are coming out lately, that people are saying are mixed completely in the box, were recorded with great microphones and analog gear by some really great engineers. So, as everybody's always telling you, the better the sounds are going in, the easier it's going to be to mix. But I have to say, when I went from analog to the box and then spent years and years in Logic just in the box from 2005 to like 2014, and then I started getting some gear again because it became possible to do I/O with analog gear, and it became possible to go in and out of the box, and you know, it's okay, rather than you're killing your signal and you're killing your bits and you're changing your waveforms and all this stuff everybody was worried about. I noticed a huge difference even with the Warm Audio 76. It just felt warm. It just felt spacious. It felt like I could hear a dimension that I wasn't hearing in plugins. So the gear to me makes a huge difference. And if you ever think that you can't tell the difference between different preamps or different microphones, and it just sounds like another microphone in the headphones, open up a session. Create a session in any DAW that you're using and just say or sing the same short little phrase with your mic or each mics from the same distance from your voice and the same preamps, and then change and compare preamps and compare microphones, and you'll hear the different colors that you have offered to you through all that gear, which will help you make choices later. I've been experimenting with different studio monitors, different pieces of gear. I've always been experimenting with different guitars and basses. I've probably had over 125 different guitars in my life. But they record and I perform with them and I write tons of songs with them. And it gets to a point where it's like, okay, now I want to try this shape, or I want to try that pickup, or I want to try, this particular whatever. So I keep my favorite ones and I sell and trade and buy other ones, and it's a blast. It's a blast to be us, play with these things. So I could show you some of the things that are new. There are Dyna Audio studio monitors here now on the computer side of life. There's the Wes Audio NG bus comp, and there's the Trident A series. You see now the Lexicon PCM 91. Underneath here, where some people would put a keyboard, I have this Drummer speaker selector. And what's fun about that is that you can choose the low, mid, or high to just hear those frequencies. I found this Kurzweil 1000 on Reverb, and that's a really cool sound module. I have always loved the Kurzweil baritone horns. I put French horns and baritone horns in a lot of songs, and I really love that sound, so I needed that sound back. This Heritage Audio Tube Ester is really fun. It's got some nice tubes hanging out the back, and it sounds pretty awesome. My friend Alec Britz encouraged me to get the two Apollo X16s, and what a fantastic piece of advice that was. Thank you so much, Alec. And then, of course, he does all kinds of gear review, and this Warm Audio 2 MPX just sounded so dreamy. I really enjoy this piece too. Alec also loves this Auto BAM reverb, so it was really fun to grab that. My friend John Melo, Bongo Beach Productions, loves these Neumann speakers, so I thought I would check those out. Comes with a really cool big subwoofer, and then when you get the external microphone, you can tune them and do that whole series of testing, and it actually tunes the speakers to your room. That's pretty freaking amazing, and things sound pretty darn good down here now. It looks like I have solid walls down here, but this is the Owens Corning basement finishing system. It takes care of the early reflections because these are all soft, cushiony walls. And I had that put in because it was an easier way to finish the basement and take care of the early reflections. So you see, these are just hunks of material of insulation with aluminum beams. Elliot Shiner had told me, well, if you're going to have all that kind of cushioned walls, you better have a live floor. You better have a wood floor. So this is just a nice wood floor you can get very simply over at Home Depot. I've often printed the results from any piece of gear I'm using, especially when I'm doing an I/O thing in Logic, so that I have it. Whether it remembers the settings via a plug-in and the Ethernet cable or not, I like to print the results so that it's always part of the mix. And now, since things are going through the mixer, it's even more exciting for me because it's a performance. The mix is a performance like it was in the old days. There's no latency. If the analog gear is all hanging out with the mixer, everything's happening live. It's analog. It's wonderful. It's clean. It's going in. It's not doing futzy weird things with computers. It's a very, very cool way to do it. So try that. Try doing as many different things you want to play with the sound before you hit record and see how that works out for you. Then when you combine them later, like half your work is done, half the decisions are done too. That's always good. I think what boggles everybody is having so many choices, and when you think about it as a creative person, we have infinite decisions on the writing process, on the choosing of chords, on the choosing of melodies, on the instrumentation, on the arrangement, on the tempo, on the players, on the lyrics, what you want to say, how you want to say it. It goes on and on and on. Then there's the sound of everything and the gear you want to use and how you want to mic it or plug it in or where it's going to go and if you're going to use an amp or if you're... It just goes on and on and on. So don't get bogged up in all that. Just take it one step at a time. I've never had to think about, now I have to put on a producer hat or a writer hat or an engineer hat or I'm the artist now, I have to turn on the artist hat. To me, it's been like a straight through thing. I have a tiny little idea. I can turn that into a tune. I can turn that into a song. I can write some words. I can now put some sounds to it. I can play some instruments and make it sound like a real thing. It's just never been a separate thing for me. It's just sort of a through, this is how it gets there. And I've just learned all the different things I need to learn to make it better and better and stronger on all those different fronts. So, okay, maybe I wear a lot of hats, but I like it. I enjoy it. I enjoy getting my ideas to be actual realities. And that's what it's all about. So have fun being you. You do it too. Go ahead.
Conversations face to face.